This Stealing the Mind Bible Conference presentation is by Jesse Lee Peterson and is entitled Healing America from Racial Hate. For a free catalog of over 250 awesome Bible studies on DVD or CD, call Compass at 800-977-2177 or on the web at compass.org.
How's everybody? Thank you so much for inviting me here. I absolutely appreciate it. I do not take it for granted at all. I want you to know that I have the antidote to healing America from the poison of hate, blame, and victimhood. I want you to know that our battle is a spiritual battle. God said that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and wickedness in high places. And that if we are children of God, we are all family, and we should know that the battle is spiritual. Everything that we do in life is spiritual. And we need to come to understand that, because if we don't come to that understanding, we're going to lose this battle. Satan is busy. He's the author of this world, and his children are on a rampage right now. And they're desperately trying to win, but we can win. I have the answer. I do want to tell you that there is no such thing as racism. It does not exist, and it has never existed. And that's why we can't solve the problem. We're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Have you noticed that? And you even thought, well, if we gave black people a black president, then they would see that white Americans are not against them. And so let me go out and vote for liberal, socialist, redistribution of wealth, black liberation theology, Louis Farrakhan lover, Al Sharpton lover. What's that other guy? His preacher. Jeremiah Wright Jr. lover. You thought that if I vote for this, then black Americans would see that I don't care about their color. It's about character, not color. But instead, things got worse rather than getting better. We are more divided today as a race than any other time in the history of America. And that is because there is no such thing as racism. It does not exist. That's a word that the children of the lie made up in order to manipulate white people, to take their stuff away from them, and to keep black Americans angry, dumbed down, and demoralized. And you cannot control a moral people. You have to demoralize them in order to control them. And so they keep them in that fallen state of anger in order to manipulate and control them for their own personal gain. The race hustlers and others. This battle that we are fighting is the same battle that we have in our families, at work, husband and wives, children and parents. It's the same kind of battle. And that battle is anger. And anyone who has anger in his or her heart have no love. They have fear, they have doubt, they have worry, they have insecurity. They're looking to the world to make them feel good. They're looking to the world to please them, and the world can never please you. That's why God said we must be born again of his nature, because anger is not the nature of God. Anger is the nature of your father, the devil, and in that state of anger, you're always judging yourself and other people. Have you ever had, I remember I used to date a lot, and as long as I did what the woman wanted me to do, she loved me. Oh, you're so wonderful. Just love me, right? And the moment I said no, she hated me. And then I would get angry, and now I'm in a fallen, I feel guilty in that fallen state of anger, and I have to buy what she wants in order to make her feel good so we can get along. Any man ever gone through that? He said every man have gone through that. Well, that's because of the anger. Children of God cannot be angry and have love because God's nature is all love, nothing but love, but not the human love. It's a love that you can't taste, you can't touch, and you cannot feel, but you're guided by that love. Because once you become one in Christ, then you become that love, your nature changes to that. And so that's what we need. I write about Michael Brown, for example. You heard of Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin, right? From the Ferguson situation. And Trayvon is from Florida with the Joyce Zimmerman situation. We did some research on these people. And what we found is that Michael Brown, for example, father and mother split up when he was very young. And Michael had lived with his mother for a while, and they didn't get along because you know how boys grow up, and sometimes girls, the mother can't handle them. And plus, his mother was out of control, too. And so she couldn't handle him. But the father would try to go and pick up his son so that he could be with him. And the father and the mother did not get along. The mother made it impossible for the father to pick up his son and bring him to his house. And he had another woman at the time. And finally, Michael was able to go and live with the father, but because the father's life wasn't stable, Michael couldn't stay there, so he ended up leaving, and he moved into the home of his grandmother. And his grandmother could not handle him. He was so big, you know, she couldn't handle him. So Michael Brown grew up without love of a father and a mother. And I have to tell you, the worst thing that can happen to a child, male or female, never mind the color, is to grow up disconnected from your father. When you grow up disconnected from your father, it leaves a void. It leaves an emptiness. You feel unloved. That's why God said, one day I'm going to turn the children back to the fathers and the fathers back to the children. Now is the time for that to happen. Michael Brown had no love. He grew up empty, angry, and lost. Because when you don't love your father, you create a different mindset because you fall into a state of anger. And in that state of anger, everything you do is wrong. Every decision you make is wrong. Everything you try to do to make yourself feel better is wrong. So this guy grew up being angry. He became a thug. And so on the day when he encountered that incident with the police officer, Michael Brown brought it on himself because he had no love. He thought he was a bully. He respected no authority. He did not respect himself. So he brought that on himself. The same thing with Trayvon Martin down in Florida. His parents were no good. They did not marry, they didn't stay together and raise their children. Children God created it so that children will have a father and a mother. Not a stepfather, not an uncle, not a cousin, but a real dad, a natural-born father. Because when you love your natural-born father, you love God. Whether we know it or not, realize it or not, or accept it or not, the man represents Christ on earth. He may be a bad representation, but he still represents Christ on earth. And in the black community, for the last 50 or 60 years, they have not had that for the most part. They only had their mothers to raise them, and most of the time, the mothers are angry because their fathers were not there for them while growing up. And then they get involved with these men who are not connected to righteousness, and then they have these babies, and the fathers are not there to guide the children in the right way to go, so they become angry, and they turn the children away from the fathers. And I'm telling you, that is the worst thing that can happen. And when you read my book, The Antidote, you're going to see that that is the major problem. O.J. Simpson, I write about him. You ever heard of him? Stay out of O.J.'s way. But O.J. Simpson, father walked out on him when he was 5 years old. They lived in San Francisco. and his father became a homosexual. And he started dressing in women's clothing. At that time, they called it drag queens. And now they call it something else. What do they call it, James? Transgender. But a transgender is still a drag queen. So his father, in my opinion, so his father became a homosexual, started dressing in drag, and he left his family. And he went down on Castro Street, and he just became a full-fledged woman, like a woman, wanted to be a woman. And he ended up dying of AIDS later on. Now, just think about that. You are 5 years old, and suddenly you find out that your father is a homosexual. And your father's going to walk out on you and leave you alone to raise yourself, or the mother tried to raise him. That's enough to turn you into anger. OJ has anger that he has never dealt with because he has not forgiven his father. Barack Obama, how many of you heard of him? Did anybody here, be honest, anybody here vote for Barack Obama? Only one honest lady. God bless you. And the rest of you, you better repent. Barack Obama had a white mother and a black father. His mother hated white Americans. She hated her own skin color. And so she taught Barack Obama that America was a racist society. And then his grandmother had a negative encounter with a black man, and she overreacted to that situation. Because when you're angry, you can't help but overreact to situations, to the challenges of life, because you don't have a solid foundation to stand on when you have anger. And so his grandmother overreacted to that situation, and she gave Barack Obama the impression that she hated black people as well. And so he's still growing up, watching this. Barack Obama's father went to Hawaii from Kenya, and he spoke to Barack's classroom, 8th grade class, and he told them that white Americans and whites in Africa are racist, and that they hated black people and they wanted to keep black people down. So even though Barack Obama is half black and half white, he identified more with blacks because he has this hatred in his heart. And Barack Obama did not have his father there to raise him. He did not have him. Again, the worst thing that can happen to you is not to have your father there to be for you. And a good father, because sometimes the fathers are in their homes, but they are not connected to God. They're weak men. They're like mama's boy. Any lady ever been married to a man who was like your son? You're not going to tell me? It's like a mother and son relationship. And that's because those men didn't have their fathers there. But Barack Obama's father wasn't there for him, so he's a very empty, he feels unloved man. And that's why he can identify with groups like Black Lives Matter. Have you heard of them? Black Lives Matter is no different or even worse than the KKK. They really are. They are mean, they are hateful, they are evil, they are intimidating, they don't respect anyone. These people were shouting in New York, what do we want? Kill the cop. When do we want it? Now. And they got away with it. Nobody was arrested. And those people are growing up without fathers and mothers in their homes, so they are empty and they are angry. And instead of the black churches, and instead of the black leaders, and instead of white Americans who are afraid of being called racist, telling them that you need to drop your anger, you need to forgive your parents so that God can forgive you, then you'll feel better. You'll feel free. The white folks won't say it, well, not out loud, because they are afraid of being called racist. If you disagree with black people at all, you're racist. And so white people have shut down, and you're going to regret it. Because anytime you shut down from your enemy, he will destroy you. He will absolutely. The worst thing that you could be in life is a weak person, a weak man or a weak woman. And you've shown weakness to black Americans. And now we have knockout games, you know, where the blacks are going around. Anybody here have been knocked out yet? Nobody? Keep on living. They hate you because of your weakness. You won't correct them. It's the same way with your children. If you don't correct your children, they'll turn on you. Have you noticed that? They disrespect you, they steal from you, they lie to you, they just take over because they know that you're afraid of them. And the worst thing that you could have is fear. So Barack Obama identified with these people because he's just like them. He has the same spirit, he served the same God. And that God is of evil. And they hate white Americans. It has nothing to do with what you have done or not done. It starts in the home first. And unless we start restoring that family and telling the truth about what's really going on, it's going to only get worse. And it really doesn't matter who is president. We could get Cruz or Trump or anybody. But if we don't rebuild that family, encourage men to turn back to God and love him with all their heart, soul, and might, and then along with nothing else. You know, the greatest commandment is that we should love God with all our heart, soul, and might, along with nothing else. And if you love anything else along with God, then you don't love God. Whomever it is that you love is your God. And so when you love God, then he's going to live in you. You're going to become his son or his daughter, and then his love will be passed down to the family. All this other love is fake love. That's why it doesn't work. And so this so-called race stuff is no different than fights in families. If you have angry, just think about it. You have sons and daughters and cousins who they get along with you, or friends. They get along with you as long as you do what they want you to do. Oh, I just love you. You're such a good friend. You're such a good parent. And the moment they want something from you or you disagree with them, they get mad. The anger comes out and they become your enemy. Have you noticed that? And there's nothing you can do to convince an angry person. Because they're in darkness. That anger is that of their father, the devil. They're in darkness, and there's nothing that you can do. They have to get over that by admitting that they were angry in order for them to see what's going on. You cannot convince an angry person because they're living in darkness. There's no light in anger. There's no love in anger. And I know God said in the Bible, it says something like be angry and sin not. It doesn't mean human anger. It means see evil and deal with evil, but don't judge evil, don't hate it, because you become like what you hate and it will control you. You take on the identity of evil because we are not God. We can't judge it. He will reveal it to us. He will show us so that we can be protected from it and deal with it. And I know this because I grew up without my father. I grew up on a plantation down in Alabama. I grew up under the Jim Crow laws. And my father impregnated my mother when she was very young. And when she told him about it, he denied it. No, that's not me. I didn't do it. And so my mother ended up marrying my stepfather before I was born. Because in those days, it was an embarrassment to have children out of wedlock. Now you can have as many as you want by many different men and everybody celebrated because the shame is gone. But when I was born, I had a yearning for my father. I wanted my real father. It was inside my body. I stayed in Alabama with my grandparents because I didn't want to be with a stepfather. And my stepfather was a nice man, but I didn't want him. I wanted my real father. I couldn't help it. It was a yearning for my father. And I remember my father used to come and sneak around and see me because my grandmother allowed it to happen. And when I saw my father as a kid, it was like looking at Jesus Christ. It fulfilled my soul. And when he left, I felt the void again. And nothing on earth could please me. Nothing could satisfy me except the love of my father. And so I had this emptiness. Long story short, I moved to LA when I was 18, and I started asking around. I was telling the preachers, I have this emptiness. I have this void. What is it? And they said, well, it's racism. You hate the white man trying to hold you down. Now, I didn't hear that picking cotton in Alabama. My grandparents didn't complain about that at all. They were good men and women of God, and they did what they had to do. And they taught us to love all people, that was good and bad and all, right? But the preachers out in California said it was racism. So for the first time in my life, because when you're angry, you cannot believe the truth, but you can believe a lie. I fell for that lie, and my life went to hell in a handbasket. It got worse rather than getting better. And so I suffered. I ended up smoking pot and all that stuff. Anybody ever smoked pot? Look at all these good Christians saying they just... all these good Christians. You better confess your sins. They're like, no. But I had so much guilt, and trying to get rid of the guilt, I smoked pot. And I would feel better for a minute, but it didn't last. Long story short, and again, I write about it, I asked God, one day I was 38, I asked God to let me see myself, and he showed me that I resented my parents. And because I resented, especially my father, I was separated from him. And I went and apologized to my parents. I apologized to my mother. It was the hardest thing in the world to do with my mother, because you know how women don't like to hear the truth about themselves. No, it wasn't me. It was somebody else. It was your daddy. Isn't that right, ladies? And so I went and forgave my mother. It was the hardest thing. I had this fear of my mother because while growing up, I thought she was mean. So I was afraid of her. I went in and I apologized. I told her that I resented her because she tried to keep me away from my father, and I wanted my dad. And my mother apologized, and she told me about her life, and exactly what she had done to me was done to her. And it just passed on from generation after generation because people don't deal with it. Families don't deal with anger in families, and why is this happening? So that you can forgive. Christ said, before you enter into the kingdom of heaven, you must forgive, because you're not going to enter in if you got any anger in your heart at all. Not one iota of anger will enter into the kingdom of heaven within. And we do have the kingdom within us and above. But the kingdom of heaven is at hand. As long as you might even go to church, lift up holy hands, hoop and holler. But if you have anger, you're separated from God. You've got to forgive. And he will forgive you and take that identity away from you. It's a spirit that made a home in you most of the time when you were a kid. And it grew in you because no one ever told you to forgive. Forgive whomever it is that you resent. But when I forgave my parents, God forgave me, and I've not been the same since. All of my fears are gone, my doubts, my worries, insecurity. I have none of that. And 26 years have gone by, 27, and I have perfect peace in my heart. And I've gone through more hell in the last 20. When I woke up and realized it wasn't racism, that black people are suffering, not all but most, due to the lack of moral character and the destruction of the family, I started an organization called BOND, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. And our purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. We work with all men, but I believe that if black men were to turn back to God and away from these race-hustling so-called black leaders like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Barack Obama. Oh, did you know Barack Obama had a meeting with the NAACP, the Urban League, Black Lives Matter, Al Sharpton, and some of those other race hustlers? It was like a Klans meeting. When I heard about it, it felt like a KKK meeting. And he had a meeting with them. Can you imagine what would have happened had George Bush had a meeting at the White House with the KKK and the skinheads? All hell would have broke loose. Black folk would have burned down the White House and Bush. But because of the double standard in America and the fear of white Americans, these people have been able to do what they wanted to do. Barack Obama, in the last 8 years now, have almost brought America to her knees. It's almost there. And you know who I blame? I blame we, the people. because this is our country. God created this country. He gave some men years ago the wisdom to create the most powerful country, Judeo-Christian country in the world. And what do? We let the son of Satan come in and just give it to him. Give it to him. And I don't care who you vote for this time around, if we don't make them do what they're supposed to be doing, nothing's going to change. Look at the weak, pathetic, pitiful excuse of Republican representatives that we had. I've never seen men be that weak. Well, why don't you stop at Obama on this Fast and Furious thing, or the IRS scandal, Benghazi? Whatever Obama has wanted to do, he's done it, and nothing's been done about it. No wonder he can meet with the black Klansman folks and get away with it, because nobody stopped evil. No one stopped evil. And you need to know that God is with us. Really, greater is he that is in us than he that's in the world. And if you know that, then you know that the battle is not physical. And so when someone calls you names, you just look at them like they're crazy. Let it roll off your back. Let them call you whatever they want, because they're just trying to get control over you. That's why they call you a name. And if you still have your ego and you give in to that, you lose. I have been called Uncle Tom, sellout, you hate your mama, you hate your color, you hate who else I hate? I've been called coon. You ever heard the word coon? And I grew up in Alabama. The only coon that I was aware of was a raccoon. I didn't know I could be a coon. And I have been called the head coon. Once I won the award for the Coon of the Year. I bet you never won the award for the Hunky of the Year. I do have to tell you, before God took away my anger and allowed me to enter into the kingdom of heaven within, I would have been afraid to deal with that. I would not have had the courage to deal with it. But when God took away my fear and made me whole, he took all the fear, the doubt, the worry, so I don't care what they call me. Call me whatever you want. I don't care, because what I do is because God allows it to happen. He had me on this path. I grew up, I'm not that very well educated. You can tell the way I speak, right? And so they try to attack me and they say, you're not educated. You can't speak properly. I also grew up with a cleft palate and my lip was split. And they say, you have a cleft palate. All the things that they're telling me I already know about. I'm like, don't you have something new? I already know about those things, but I'm not bothered about those things because I care about my soul more than I do the body. And yet I take care of the body too, but my soul is more important because my soul was created in God's image by him. And he is there now. I do want to tell you this quick story about my father. I'll tell you this. My father, I finally got a chance to meet him. And I went up to Indiana, I met my father, I snuck around to see him for a while. I looked just like my daddy, and then I have a brother who looked just like my daddy. And people used to tell us when they saw us together, you guys look like twins. They're like, are you Cullen's son? And it used to make me feel afraid when they would say that. It was to scare me because I didn't want my mother to know I was seeing my father. But to me, it's what I needed. So my father and I finally worked out everything. And my father and I spent a number of years, maybe 15 to 20 years. He became my father, and I became his son. And my father made me whole. I'm telling you, there's nothing like being made whole by your father. I'm serious. My father and I became one. I got a chance to talk to him, disagree with him. My father started calling me to ask me to help him with the other kids. Like, come home, let's have a meeting. See, can we get the other kids to forgive, right? But my father and I had a perfect relationship. And as a kid, I used to wonder, what is it like to have a relationship with your father? because I wanted that. And I have to tell you, it's like having a relationship with God. It fulfills your soul. And then once it fulfilled my soul, I can tell now that God is my Father. Before I talked about that, but I didn't know for sure God was my Father. But now God is my Father because I went through my earthly father to get back to my spiritual father. And so whatever I ask of my Father now, I have the confidence that it'll happen. When the threats come, I've had guns drawn on me, my telephone's been tapped. I mean, just go on, but I have no fear. You know, I watch out, but I have no fear because God took away my fear. And I know that nothing's going to happen unless He allows it to happen. He's in charge of everything. So when I have to go through things, who am I that I should complain about it? Christ went through much more than what I can ever endure. So I just go through what I have to go through without complaining about it because I know God is with me. And I'm telling you that because I'm encouraging you to forgive your earthly fathers first. How can you say you know God or love God when you don't love your earthly father? If you don't love Him, forgive Him, you're never going to know God. You'll know about Him, but you won't have that one-on-one with Him. You won't be born again, and we must be born again. And so we can win this battle, folks. This is the greatest country in the world. This battle is a spiritual battle. Have no fear. God is with you. We got to take back the family. And men, the worst thing that can happen to your wife and your children is for you to be weak. And the same thing that has happened to black men, the government came in 50 to 60 years ago under Lyndon B. Johnson and told black Americans, we're going to take care of you, but you can't have a man around. Remove that father, and then evil can come in. The black folks fell for it. The government became the daddy of the family, and the race hustler became the representatives. And it just kept black people down. And because blacks are so angry, it's hard to get them to see that. That's why I urge you today to tell them the truth. Just be honest. And when they call you whitey or blackie or whatever, just look at them the way you're looking at me right now. And just relax and let them have fit. You're just a racist. You just hate me because I'm black. You don't hate them because they're black. It's just that they're in a fallen state of anger and they hate the truth. The same thing in the homes. When your family member is in a fallen state of anger, they hate hearing the truth from you. They try to make you feel like you're the villain, like you are the problem when they're the problem. Well, that's the same spiritual things that's going on with black folk. Most black people are being made angry first in the homes. And rather than forgiving and overcoming that, they go out into the world, and the world tells them that it's racism. And so they believe that lie, they run around blaming you for it, instead of pulling away, going to God and repenting, forgiving their parents first so God can forgive them. We got to start standing up. We have a little more time left. If we are children of God, we are brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ. And men, they are attacking the white man now, if you notice. They call you a racist. They say you hate women, you hate black people, you hate everything because they want to turn you away from your from your family. And when they turn you away from your family, then they can bring in evil and take over in the same manner that they have done to black folk. You have a responsibility to take care of your family, to protect them, to love God so He can work through you to protect your family. My father died in January of this year, and he had Alzheimer's disease. I do want to tell you, my father died a Democrat. Can you imagine? I'm so glad that God didn't let me die a Democrat. I used to be a Democrat. But when God changed my heart and put love in there instead of anger, I had asked Him to do that. So I went back to God after He had done that because I was so free. And I could no longer identify with the Democratic Party. The platform is anti-God, is anti-family, is anti-freedom, is anti-everything that's good, right? So I went back to God. I said, oh, God, I have one more favor. And He's like, what is it? He got tired of me coming to Him. And I said, you have changed my heart. I have love in my heart. I don't have hate. I don't have anger anymore. I'm a free man, but I'm still a Democrat. And I said, "Can you forgive me for being a Democrat?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, no problem." And so I became a conservative Republican. And when my folks found out that I had become a conservative Republican, all hell broke loose. It was crazy, and it still is crazy. I could get along with my family better being a KKK member than I could being a black Republican conservative. It's amazing. You should go to some of the family meals. As soon as I walk in, they're all the Democrats hanging around, waiting to get me. So my father died a Democrat, but when my father died, I felt like my father did not die. I saw his body gone, but I feel that my father is still with me. Really, it's like I don't miss my father at all because he's with me. And I've never experienced the death of anyone like that before. I was close to my grandmother, my grandfather, but I was sad and carrying on crying when they died. The only time I would feel sad for my father when he died, if I went into my imagination. You know how when you go into your imagination, Satan tell you all these lies, and you start to feel sad, you become emotional and feel all that. And he tried to make me think in the imagination that I was sad for my father, but I wasn't. It was a lie coming from Satan. But when I didn't live in the darkness of the imagination, I was glad that my father was gone physically because he had so many medical problems. He had suffered a lot. So I was glad that he was gone. But my father is still with me. I feel completed by my father. So I want to encourage you. The first thing that you got to do, if you have anger, any little bit iota, any taste of anger is of your father, the devil. God is all love. And if we are children of God, we have to be all love. So when stress comes, have you noticed how people trip out in stress? Whenever situations happen, they start tripping out, overreacting. That's because they have anger. There's no solid foundation there. So they can't handle the situations in life. Stress is fine as long as you don't allow it to enter into you and destroy you from within. Because stress will bring on cancer, heart attacks, all kinds of diseases, headache, and then you find yourself on medication and you don't have a chance. But if you don't have hatred in your heart, when stress comes, it won't enter in. You overcome it. You deal with the issue. You don't overreact because you have that invisible wall built around your soul from God that will not allow the darkness to take over. So here's the deal. And that's what we're doing at Bond, by the way. We have this nonprofit. We have a private school now. We have a home for young men. We tutor and counsel them. If they want to go to college, we help them get into different schools. If they don't, we help them start a business, show them how to invest their monies. And we've done this for 26 years without one dime from the government, not one penny from the government. It's people like you helping us to help others, and they help when they start working, to give their time and their money and stuff like that, because the battle is spiritual. Once they forgive their parents, all anger disappears, and they realize that racism is not real. White folks are not trying to hold them back. It's the failing of the parents first. Wait until you read the antidote. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your afro off. And if you don't have an afro, it's going to create one. And by the way, I don't have an afro. I am not an African American. I don't have an afro. I have an Amerifro. There are no African drums beating in my chest. The American guitar is playing in my heart. I mean, as black as the ace of spades. You turn these lights out, you only see white teeth. But 100% American. Born on a plantation down in Alabama, but I'm glad that God allowed me to be born here so I didn't have to sneak across the borders, so I didn't have to fill out any papers to get here, and I'm not going to be complaining about this great gift that God has given me. I am an American, and I want to encourage you to turn back to the Father. I want to encourage you to turn back to the Father within. If you have this anger, be honest about it so God can take that spirit away from you. Then it can't control your mind and emotion. And then I want you to, husbands and wives, treat each other honestly and with love and be fair and honest so the kids can see that kind of relationship happening. And when they go out into the world, they'll do the same thing because they learn by example. They learn what you do, not what you say. Because of the spirit, we communicate spiritually. So I want to also urge you to tell Black Americans the truth. They are not getting it in their churches. They are not getting it in their homes and their communities. They are not getting it from the government. If you love God, you owe it to them to tell them the truth. And some are going to hear and some won't. And those that don't like it, if you are afraid when you tell them the truth, just take off and run. Just take off. Because the truth is going to stay there and it's going to work on them. But every time you overreact, you lose. If they call you a name and you become afraid, you lose. Because it'll seem to make them think they were right and you were wrong. But if you stand still and don't overreact and know God, you'll win. You'll be able to help them. God is my witness to that because I used to be a coward when I had that anger. He took that away from me. I don't feel brave, but I don't have fear. I love what's right with all my heart, soul, and might. I love it more than I do my children, my grandkids, and I love my kids, but I love God, and I love what's right first because God set me free. He opened up my eyes that I might see, and I see that it's a spiritual thing. We have some books out there, so antidote, so everybody and their mama need to pick up 5 and give them out. And also, if you make a donation to our nonprofit, just make it out to Bond, B-O-N-D. Again, thank you so much for having me here. And please, in the mighty name of Jesus, know that we have the power within us to defeat evil. And evil works in some people as good work in others. So let that power come out so we can save the family and so we can save our country. Thank you again for having me here, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
This has been Healing America from Racial Hate, presented by Jesse Lee Peterson. To receive a free catalog of over 250 awesome Bible studies on DVD or CD, all using and defending a literal translation of the Bible, information on upcoming Bible conferences in your area, or details of our missionary outreach and trips to Israel, call Compass at 800-977-2177 24 hours a day, or visit us on the web at compass.org.